Greetings, everyone. This is Payman Lorenzo, your host of the Leader Without podcast. Today, I have a back-to-back again. My good friend Michelle from Nova Scotia, one of my favorite places in Canada. Even though I haven't yet been there, but I know it's high on my list because pretty much every single person I met in my life from Nova Scotia has been nothing short of absolutely amazingly friendly. Especially when I was working in Edmonton and the oil fields. Amazing. Lots of people from Nova Scotia there, very friendly. And again, Michelle is no exception. So we had a wonderful conversation on the podcast last week. And yeah, just like me, she's been around the world. She's had experience of living and working abroad. She went to South Korea and then to the Philippines, opened a business, did some teaching there, and even get married. Sold a business. So she did quite a lot of things in the Philippines and Korea. And now, now we're going to talk about the next chapter, which is coming back home in Canada. So before we even get there, welcome back to the show, my friend.
Hi, Payman. Thanks so much. We had a great conversation last time. I think we ran out of time, so we decided to continue the conversation, which is fun.
Absolutely, because there was so much more to cover. I mean, this could be not just two-part, but even an entire season because there's so much that we can talk. Just your experience in Korea can be one episode, the experience in the Philippines another. Starting, opening, and running a business in the Philippines could be an entire episode by itself. Getting married, selling a business, so all of that can be an entire season. So I'm sure this could be an amazing, topic for a book. So a book and even a few books and even a podcast. But so tell us now, let's pick up from where we left off. So after all that adventure around the world in Asia, now you're back in Canada. Take us from there to now. So what happened after that once you moved back to Canada? Was it easy was it easy for you to readjust back from living in the tropics on Paradise and Boracay to now and sunny and tropical Nova Scotia again?
Well, it certainly was a change of seasons, so to speak. The reacclimatizing to, Nova Scotia has great weather typically in the spring, summer, and fall, but experiencing winter again after 6.5 years of being, that was a bit of a shock. But it was good to be home. It was great to be back with family, and my family was very happy that I was back home, particularly my mom. And but I decided when I first got back that I wasn't really sure that I wanted to go back into the public school education system. And so coming from having had the restaurant in the Philippines, it was successful. So I opened a cafe instead of going back into teaching right away, and opened it by myself, ran it by myself, cooked, cleaned, did it all for a year. And then I decided that I would go and do, at the encouragement of my former grade 3 teacher, who was coming into the cafe. She said, why don't you just go and do some interviews and see what happens? So I did a few interviews and at a local junior high school, which was actually my junior high school that I attended as a student. But I kept the cafe going because I have an entrepreneurial spirit. It was something that I had built with the help of my family, kind of from the ground up, and really wanted to ensure that it was something that the community still was able to have. And so I hired a couple of employees, and then was able to work and also keep the cafe going.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful. So the first question that comes to mind is, how different or difficult, challenging is it to run a business in the Philippines versus back home in Nova Scotia? You're in a small town, right? You're not in Halifax.
Right. I'm still in a
Okay.
small town. Yes.
Okay.
Still rural Nova
Okay.
Scotia, not in the city. There, of course, there orientation and the regulations that
Mm.
that you needed to meet there that I needed to meet. Excuse me, but similar things in the Philippines. There were paperwork and documents and things that needed to be filled out as well, permits. So the paperwork on that end wasn't really a whole lot different. Um, I guess the biggest difference was that this time I was doing it by myself.
Mm.
I was managing it, and I was doing the menu, I was cleaning, like that was probably the biggest difference, was that I didn't have a team at that time.
So before talking about starting a business in Nova Scotia, how challenging, how difficult, how long was it for you to open a business in the Philippines?
I believe we started building because we rented a space in a new mall, a strip mall area on the island. And so we leased a space and we started to renovate right away. It was a kind of blank slate. So it probably took, if I remember correctly, because it has been a while ago, it probably took us 5 or 6 months to
Okay.
get that
Oh wow.
up and going. But it really wasn't, in the grand scheme of things, that's really not a long time to
Sure.
start from scratch.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was fast in that sense.
What was your number one challenge in the Philippines while starting the business?
Well, it was a Japanese and seafood restaurant. So my former husband and I, we cooked. We were great cooks. We both loved food, but we didn't know the intricacies of making Japanese food. So we self-taught. We also had a number of friends on the island who were Japanese and working on the island, or visiting the island and visiting friends who, tweaking tastes and tweaking textures and presentations. So we had a lot of help there too, which was really terrific.
Awesome. Question. Why Japanese restaurant and why not say Korean or even, hey, Nova Scotia delicacies, something that would be unique? And
It was it was something the island needed. There
oh,
wasn't
okay.
a Japanese food restaurant
Okay.
there.
Okay. Wow. Interesting. Now, coming back home in Nova Scotia, what would you say was your number one challenge in starting the business?
Believing that I could do it myself. Just taking on the challenge and knowing that, really deep down knowing that I could do it, but that, that's a big scary thing to take on alone.
Yeah.
And so that was probably the biggest challenge, was just doing it, believing that I could.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Wow. And then how long did you keep that cafe running for?
Spring of 2000, it opened in the spring of 2005, and I closed it in the fall of 2008. So
Okay.
3.5 years or so.
Why did you decide to close it?
I realized that I was not Superwoman, and that working full time in a middle school and trying to keep a
Oh.
business going, yeah, it was a lot. It
Mhm.
was a bit too. Something had to go, and the cafe was the most logical choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine in that case. What would you say has been the number one lesson you learned through running a business in two different continents,
Good question.
in two different, completely different cultures?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if
Yeah.
I know the answer to that right now.
What is the
I
first thing that
think,
comes to your
I
mind?
think,
Because usually the first thing that comes to mind is the right answer, because that's what the information we get from our soul.
yeah, I think probably the biggest thing was because I wasn't Filipina, because I was a white woman in the Philippines, running a business. I think that was probably the most challenging, because the sake of paperwork and documentation and making sure that everything was okay for me to be there.
And also, you mentioned something that is quite common for anyone that spent any amount of time in Asia, but it's when you're a Westerner, you get in a lot of ways. It's a fact of reality. You get a double pricing, one for the locals, one for the foreigners. So when you were, for example, buying your products for your restaurant, did you notice that because you're a white woman, you might have gotten the price a little bit bumped up because of that factor alone?
No, that wasn't something that I encountered. The man I married was Filipino, and
Okay.
our business partners were, his sister and her husband. So that wasn't
Okay, good,
an issue. Yeah,
good.
no. I think maybe one of the challenges definitely was some of the politics that come up with in the Philippines, but not unlike here. There, politics is part of it too. Like, who do you know, and if there is a problem that comes up, who do you talk to? Who are your connections? That's going to be something I think that happens anywhere.
Another thing that I encountered from my experience of living and doing business in China, and I heard countless other Westerners that doing business in China. First, they started business with a local Chinese partner in China. At first, everything is fine and dandy, but as soon as the business start, you know, scaling and doing really well, then the Chinese partner starts becoming flaky and looking for excuses to basically take you out of the business and of course you as a foreigner, at least in China, you have very little recourse because everything is stacked against you. Whenever there's a court, the court and 99% backs the Chinese versus the foreigner, and basically take over the business. I've met countless people in China that had that happen to you. From your experience in the Philippines, did you encounter something similar, or did you heard any foreigner that when they started the
At all.
business with a local, at first everything was good, but as soon as the business started growing up, then the local was trying to take over and kick the person out of the business?
Yeah, no, that wasn't my experience at all.
Okay, good,
That wasn't a concern of mine, and
good,
wasn't the reason why we got out of the business.
good, good. That's good. Okay, now after the you closed the shop on the cafe shop in 2008. What was next? All right. So as I was saying, um, the question I want to ask you now is: once you closed down your coffee shop in 2008, what was next on the menu for you?
I went full in. I continued my job in
Okay.
the school I was at, but I kept kind of changing roles because I was looking for something that was a good fit for me. I found I was being challenged as a teacher. My only role was to teach curriculum outcomes and help kids get good grades, and kind of move them through the system. And I challenged that because I felt that we were kind of missing the mark. I had students in my class who struggled with learning because they didn't know how to make friends, or they had things going on outside of school that were challenging for them and that they didn't know how to manage their emotions around, or they didn't feel like they were in control of that. So I kind of started a broken record of how are we helping them develop good human skills and have them become, you know, more like stronger leaders of their own lives. I mean, teenagers are so helping them learn some skills that are going to help them throughout all of their life and help them be better able to learn was something that I was really passionate about. So I skipped around in different roles thinking that maybe it was just me. I ended up going to the city to teach for a year, wondering if maybe rural Nova Scotia wasn't where I needed to be, and realized that I just hadn't found my right fit yet. I love teaching. I love last episode, one of my core values is growth. And so me growing, but also helping other people grow. Finally, I got to a place where I became a behavior intervention resource teacher and really worked with students who struggled with managing their emotions, their strong emotions. And so I helped them work on problem solving skills, self-awareness, being able to articulate emotions, choose strategies to help calm themselves down, and develop relationship skills so that they could be better friends, they could show up in class more productively. And so that was really something that I thought, oh, right, I've arrived. This is great. Then an opportunity came for me to apply to be a social and emotional learning coach for our local school district. And with that role, I thought, this is how I'm working with these students. And it was something I was really passionate about because for myself personally, I wasn't always the most self-aware person either. I was often on kind of automatic pilot. I found myself going through the motions and, you know, doing the same things day after day after day and getting the same results and wondering why nothing was changing. So I applied for the social emotional learning coach position, had the opportunity to travel around to elementary schools, help and coaching teachers on how to implement a program that would support the social emotional learning skills of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management, and responsible decision-making. And these are skills that are good for everybody, no matter your age. But it was something that I felt really strongly about helping impact and influence, because school children some of these tools and strategies and things. By the time they get to middle school, perhaps middle school will be a little easier for them. Perhaps they'll have more strategies that they can draw on and be more available to learn, be able to manage some of those strong emotions that come up, as you know, if you remember being a teenager. And so it was a really great opportunity for me to do that. And I was in that role for 5 years. I started, however, there and, you know, looking at what about the adults? We're asking the adults to implement this program and we're asking them to role model these skills so the students can learn them and practice them. However, these types of skills, it doesn't matter how old you are. You may have them, you may not. It depends on where they model to you. Did you have the opportunity to express your emotions and be able to? Did you have somebody in your life who was able to demonstrate being maybe really upset, and then were you able to see them actually go through steps to calm down before reacting or and choosing to respond? So I started on the broken record of what about the adults, because we are asking people to do things that they're not comfortable with because they may or may not have the skills or they may not have the bandwidth or the energy or the well-being, extra effort it takes to show up this way for students. And so unfortunately, I felt like I kept hitting a brick wall, kind of just getting shut down on, we're here for the students, it's up to the adults to take care of themselves, and there are lots of resources and ways that they can do that. And so I had known for a long time that I had wanted to become a coach. At some point, already working as one in the school board, I decided to get my certification and start my own coaching practice. And so I did that in 2019. And last year in March, I resigned from my full-time position to go full-time in my business.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
So that's a perfect segue. Tell us now about your business and the impact you're having in the world.
Yeah. So I'll be very transparent. My business shifted a couple of times since 2019. Obviously, the pandemic was an interesting, and still is an interesting time to be in business. But I'm the CEO founder of 3D Life Inc. And it is a professional personal growth and well-being company for leaders and their teams. So what I offer through 3D Life and how I try to help support leaders and their teams is through looking at, where they at. Sometimes it's challenging to, particularly in a busy business, whether it's an organization or whether it's in a school, it's challenging to be a cohesive unit. It's challenging to sometimes not feel alone, particularly as the leader, but also as team members. And so what I help them do is I do some training, I do some facilitation, but I also include coaching in what I offer to help them focus on what matters, another, build some of those, not necessarily build the skills. Most people have some level of these emotional intelligence or social emotional learning skills, but helping them practice them, giving them opportunities to express and communicate with one another, and really trust themselves and each other, to be all working toward that same big picture, that same vision, the same goals, the same success that everybody's looking for. And some of the things that we talk about are being able to give high quality feedback. I think that we're in a time where, first of all, having that clear vision, that clear big picture, whether you're in a school or a school district or in an organization, what is the big picture, and does everybody know what that is? Does everybody have a clear idea of what they're doing and what they're doing it for and how they contribute to it? So that shared vision piece is really, really important, because that's the foundation, that's the springboard. And then we talk about feedback. I personally don't feel that we have a strong culture of feedback in our businesses or in our school system. Telling somebody, hey, that's very surface level. But unfortunately, we get that more often than not because everybody says, well, it's too busy, there isn't enough time. But good quality feedback actually drives the vision, but it drives also how that person, that team member feels about their job, about leadership, about the business or organization, and overall gives them more motivation and more inspiration to be doing what they're doing. And then the third piece of it of what I work on and work with is looking at how do we establish a culture of conflict. Oftentimes we think conflict is a negative thing, that it has that negative connotation of, well, the alternative is that everybody says yes and nobody disagrees with anything, and then things flop, or people aren't satisfied, they're not performing as well because they don't feel seen, they don't feel valued. And so helping people understand that there's a difference between productive conflict and unproductive conflict, that in a team meeting or as a leader, I should also be able to accept that somebody disagrees with an idea I might share, or that somebody else on the team shares something and I can speak up and say, hey, you know what, I'm not really sure on that because of my previous experience with this. Those discussions are really important to have, and oftentimes we take them personally. And so if somebody disagrees with us or goes against, we internalize it and take it personally, as opposed to looking at it objectively, as opposed to thinking, okay, wait, maybe that person has something to offer that I didn't think about, or a different perspective. So that's something that I also work on with leaders and teams. And overall, what I find is that, and what we're seeing is that people feel more committed to what they're doing, they feel more productive, and they feel more connected as a whole, which ultimately enhances the well-being and the health of the business and the organization, which is a win-win-win for the customers or the clients or the students, or and for the team overall.
Beautiful. So when you work with schools, at what level do you work? Do you work with kindergartens, primary schools, middle schools, high schools, colleges, universities, or all of the above?
I work with leaders. So and I look at it this way. I know that in business, a lot of the advice and a lot of the practices out there is looking at being very specific to who is your avatar, who is your one like specific niche that you're working with. And for me, I look at, from my business, I look at what is the task they're trying to accomplish, what is the task I help them do and can assist with, as opposed to who is it that I'm assisting, what do they want to be able to do instead. So it could be all of the above, but it just, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, share with us an example of the most remarkable transformation you've seen from one of your clients so far.
So I work one-on-one missions, either titled or untitled. And so I work one-on-one, or I can work with teams. I probably the biggest transformations I see are in the leaders, and in the people who are in trying to help the people who report to them, or help the people with whom they work, particularly if they're untitled leaders, but really ground themselves and get back to that idea that, wait a minute, as a leader, I have a lot to offer. I believe that I can do this job. I trust myself to make the right decisions, but they're also better able to communicate what they need and what they want with their team. And that also, if there's kind of a conflict situation, they regain their voice, and they're able to speak up for what they believe is true and just, and that shifts how the team performs.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, what is your, in business, there's a powerful principle of your unique selling proposition. What is your unique selling proposition? What is your irresistible offer?
It comes back to before when I mentioned that I often felt for many years, particularly when I was working in education, in those first several years of getting back to Nova Scotia and working in the system, that I was just on autopilot. I was just going through the motions and trying to and wanting things to be different, but not realizing that I was part of that solution. And so I believe that my uniqueness is in that human leadership piece, that developing the skills to be your own self leader first before thinking or trying to lead a team as effectively as you want to. There's so much mindset and beliefs that come along with being inspirational, valued leader that I believe what I offer is helping leaders kind of get back to their own self, so that then they can show up as a more human leader with their team.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Now, let's switch gears. Let's talk about the theme of this podcast is cause. What would you say for you, Michelle, is a cause that you're deeply passionate about?
I mentioned about one of the things that really kind of boggles my mind is that we're not seemingly, there's a lot of unkindness in the world, that we don't necessarily treat each other the way that we could, just for the fact that we're human beings. That there are a lot of superficial judgments that happen. And so in help through the work that I do at 3D Life, kind of developing that whole person approach, is really about just people treating one another more respectfully, treating each other less judgmentally, and being just kinder to one another. It's whether you're in a leadership position, or you're a custodian in a building, or you're the mail person, delivering mail, or a retail in a retail shop. How we treat one another should not be based on what level of job, quote unquote, level we do, or how much money we make, or what we look like. And so that is my cause. My cause is why can't we just be kinder and nicer and better human beings, period.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm fully on that with you. Now,
Yeah. And it does start with self. It starts
oh,
with you.
yes. Oh,
It
yes.
starts with you. If you're looking outside of you for all of the answers and trying to figure things out, because things outside you are the how you are as a person, then you're kind of missing the boat. It really does start with you and who you are, what you believe, what is helpful, what is unhelpful. You show up in the world, but it does start with you.
Yeah. Do you have any tip for anyone listening to that, how they can do that?
I'm not going to lie, it's work. It does.
Yes, of
It takes
course.
time. It takes time and it takes effort. But I think the first step is just accepting and acknowledging that I can do better, I can be better. And it doesn't matter, in my opinion, it doesn't matter it's a work in progress. It's something that's going to be a lifelong learning path. It's not going to be something that happens overnight, and there's always something to learn. So I believe the first step is just saying, you know what, I'd like to know more about me. I want to learn more about who I am, what I like, what I don't like.
Absolutely. I know. And it doesn't have to be like a drastic change. It can be just 1% each day, just to be 1% nicer, kinder to yourself.
Yeah,
And before you know it, over a week, that's 7% better than the week before. And that's gonna, grows into a snowball. And within a month, you will be a different person.
yeah. And it comes with being aware of
Mhm.
just wanting to make a small change.
Absolutely.
James Clear, in his book Atomic Habits, one of the biggest takeaway I took was ironically the smallest, but he said, start small, small, small. Trying to change everything all at once won't work. And that's how we often fail at doing things, because we think that in order to make change in ourselves or in our lives, we have to change how we eat, what we do for a job, how much money we make. We think we have to do everything all at once, how much we exercise. And that's where we tend to fall flat, because we don't take into consideration that we're human, and we only have so much capacity at a time to focus and to do things well. So start small, 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 like the absolute smallest thing you could do. And maybe it's as small as saying, okay, I'm going to get up and do so I can go for a walk, or I can do yoga, or whatever. Like, and that's, if movement is one of those things that you feel is important, or that you would like to incorporate into your changes, great. But it could be, I'm going to get up 20 minutes earlier so I can sit and write, just journal. Those are small things that can be started, and not expecting everything else to have to be done as well. Perfectionism comes in some of that too, because we think, well, in order to be the person I want to be, if you're clear about that, then here are all the things I need to do to get there. And it's the same in leadership. This is the leader I want. This is the type of leader I want to be, but I have all of these things to do. So where do you have time to kind of reconcile and bring those two pictures together? What's most important? What can you wait on? And I say that even for personal change, you have what it is that you want, who you want to be, where you want to be in your life. But then start small, small, small.
Absolutely. It's all about the power of small. And there's a wonderful book called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson, which is all about do 1% better today versus what you did tomorrow. Just 1%.
Yes,
And
yes,
absolutely. And that 1% over time is going to exponentially grow into something unrecognizable within a month or 2 months, even a year. But
yeah.
yeah, awesome. Listen, this is powerful. Love talking to you. Let's start wrapping things up. And to finish off, I'd like to ask you a series of rapid fire questions on advices. Ready? All right.
Yes.
So, what would you say has been so far the best piece of advice you've received in your life?
Wow. I think probably my grandfather said to me, it's been years ago. He's no longer with us. He passed last year, sadly, but
Sorry to hear that.
he lived a great life. He was 90, almost 95 when he
Wow.
did pass.
Bless his
He,
soul.
yeah, he told me years ago, why don't you start a movement?
Wow.
And I said, just remember, don't take life too seriously. And so while I had that experience in the Philippines about, kind of learning that not taking life too seriously, he solidified it for me when he said, and remember, just don't take life too seriously.
Beautiful. Now, what's been so far the worst piece of advice you've received?
Mm. I don't know if it's so much advice, but it's more the some of the programming and conditioning that we get as we, whether it's from as we grow up, or whether it's from the messages that we're bombarded by in the news or social media. And so I think it's more of a belief as opposed to advice. And the worst belief that I think is ingrained in a lot of people subconsciously is that in order to live a full life, you have to do it all. That you have to, or to be valuable as a human being or as a person in a job position, you have to be able to do it all. And I think that causes so many more problems around the idea of what we believe our worth is and how it's measured than a lot of other things.
Well said. Now, imagine that you were blessed with a time machine. You can go back in time and sit face to face with an 18-year-old Michelle. What's the number one piece of advice would give to her, knowing all that you know now?
Probably that you are enough.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
You are enough.
Absolutely. Now, do you have your own podcast yet?
Not yet.
All right. What's the number one reason you don't have it yet?
Probably, oh well, I know what it is. It's time. It's
Okay.
the other things going on in the business right now. It's time.
Yes, I can imagine that. Now, imagine that you add your podcast today and you're interviewing the most special person in your life, which is yourself. So, interviewing yourself today. What is the first question you want to ask yourself? Don't think too much. What's the first question that comes to your mind?
Oh, don't think too much. I think the first question that comes to mind is, what do you want people to know?
About what? About you or about in general?
Yeah, I think it would be what do you want people to know about, I don't know, about what you've learned, what you like, what you feel about life.
What would be your answer?
That life doesn't only have one lane. It doesn't only have one area. That
Oh, yes.
in order to be whole, in order to feel more fulfilled, that only focusing on work, for example, and this is part of where 3D Life Inc. comes from, is living life in 3D requires that we acknowledge that all of the areas of our life are important. So personal, professional, spiritual, emotional, physical, and financial. That if we are focused and applying ourselves in all of those areas of life and ensuring that they're healthy as they can be, then we're living life more in 3D than not.
Absolutely.
And that is like only focusing on work and forgetting about personal relationships, or basing your value or worth on financial situations. Yeah, there's so much more to life than work.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, yes. Preach, preach, preach. Totally. Now, the last question, my favorite question to ask is, what's the smallest thing that you've done that has had the greatest positive impact in your life? And by small, I don't mean something small. I mean the one thing. For me, it's been starting my podcast. What about you?
Finding the courage to learn about me, finding the courage to say, okay, Michelle, we need to figure this out, and learning what made me who I am, and letting go of what didn't work for me, and focusing more on what does work for me. That has
Yeah.
been the biggest, that self-awareness
Mm-hmm.
piece was huge. It changed my life.
Did you do that through meditation, through self-reflection? How did you do that?
I did a lot of reading. I had a lot
Okay.
of had a lot of help from mentors I hope to meet someday, but may never, and that's okay. But I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of research and studying, but I also I also journaled a lot. I started meditation, and did and built a meditation practice. And something about meditation is that I love is that you don't have to sit for 45 minutes. You
Oh
don't
yeah.
have to, there are shorter ways of doing it, and benefiting from it, than thinking that you have to sit for 45 minutes. So yeah, meditation, self-reflection, journaling, questioning, like deep questioning, like what's going on there? What made you think that was whatever? Yeah, but lots of reading and research, and self-reflection for sure.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And if someone wants to connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
Well, they can visit my website at 3dlifeinc.com. There are no wwws in front of that, so you could just type in 3dlifeinc.com. You can find me on LinkedIn as well at Michelle Hurlburt. And I am on Instagram and I'm on Facebook too, but probably LinkedIn and the website are the best ways to go.
All right, I'll definitely put all of those links in the show notes. So listen, Michelle, absolute pleasure talking to you. Loved your story. That's why I asked you to come back twice, because there's so much to cover. We're probably
Thank
gonna do
you.
a part 3 in the next few months, a few weeks. We'll see. We'll do that. But for now, I salute you. You're a true leader with a heart. Stay safe, stay awesome. Keep shining your light. Keep blessing the world with your message, with your presence, with everything you're doing. We're definitely gonna be talking soon. So have a fantabulous day. Stay safe, stay
Thank
awesome.
you.
God bless you, my friend. Take care. Bye
Thank
bye.
you so much, Payman. Bye.
Bye bye.